Okay, welcome back, everybody. And without any further ado, Joseph, please introduce our next speaker.
Hi, everybody. I'm Joseph Milajanowski. I'm with the Red Team Village, and it is my honor and privilege to announce Beau Woods, our next speaker. Here at the Hacking is Not a Crime and Red Team Village Joint Conference, the HackerCon. Beau Woods, what can I say about him? He's a senior advisor with CISA, a cybersecurity innovative fellow with the Atlantic Council, a leader with I Am The Cavalry, which is a grassroots initiative, founder and CEO of Stratigos Security, and sits on the board of several nonprofits. His work bridges the gap between the security research and the public policy communities to ensure connected technology that can impact life and safety is worthy of our trust. He formerly served as interpreter in residence with the US FDA and managing principal consultant at Dell SecureWorks. Over the past several years, in his capacity, he has consulted with the energy, healthcare, automotive, aviation, rail, and IoT industries, as well as cybersecurity researchers, U.S. and international policymakers. And the White House. Beau is a published author, frequent public speaker, often quoted in media, and is often engaged in public or private speaking venues. He's also integral to a lot of stuff that goes on at DEF CON. So I added that ad hoc. But without further ado, I give you Beau Woods.
Thank you very much. I'm really excited to be here today. I've been looking forward to this conference for a while. Although I got to say, it's kind of intimidating to follow Joe Min and all his talking about the cult of the dead cow. I grew up watching their exploits, and so it's exciting, but also intimidating to be going after him. So I'm gonna, if Joe was talking about some of the ghost of hackers past or hacktivism past or some of our past in this community, I want to talk about some things that are going on right now and kind of bridge the gap to what will happen in the future. I hope if security researchers can come together and can really help become a more positive, proactive force. So this is Representative Will Hurd and Jim Langevin, and this is me. And I'll bet you're wondering, how did you get here? Well, that's a good question. It's a long story. We'll come back to that. So my first job in security was working at a hospital. And this is usually the part of the presentation where I ask people to spot all the computers they can see in this picture. And, people point out a handful of them. But then, if you look here, there are, 5 to 8 computers just in this one photo taking care of this patient. And then I ask, what's the most important asset that's being protected here? Some people say, patient health records, or some people say the parents' insurance or credit card information that they're using to pay. But really, the asset we're trying to protect here is the patient, this very vulnerable person. And this happens to be a natal intensive care unit. One of my first experiences with hacking was actually a fetal heart monitor. So one of the computers that you see here is connected up to some other systems. And this is how doctors and nurses make sure that they monitor the vital signs of the patient, make sure that they're able to catch any potential issues with the patient that might cause them to have to run in and do some type of life-saving treatment or therapy. And all of the fetal heart monitors were hacked. There was some password stealing malicious software on it that was trying to steal banking passwords, and it just happened to hit some Windows computers because that's the platform that it was targeting. So not trying to harm patients, but it had the effect of knocking offline those fetal heart monitors. And so the manufacturer wouldn't fix it. They wouldn't allow us to fix it. So we got permission from the hospital to basically fix it ourselves. And the way we did that is by using the same exploit that the malware used to get into those systems, turn it against the system again. And this time we got in, we dropped the patch, we killed the malware, and we rebooted them. And then the doctors could get back to saving lives. So there's a strong potential that some people in the room today, some people who are watching, might have the opportunity to save lives through security research. And that's what I want to hopefully inspire you all to do today. But I'm going to do it in a slightly different way. I want to tell a couple of stories. I want to tell my own story, which is that at a certain point, I realized that while we're spending literally $1 trillion every 5 years or so in people, product security, the companies that we're trying to protect are still getting hacked. So from a certain lens, it's 100% failure rate and a $1 trillion bill. And that just didn't seem okay to me. So if you recognize the hype cycle, we also have a hype cycle for when we get into security. And so, you have the initial trigger, everybody's super excited to jump in and start doing things and have a lot of fun. You go through this cycle of inflated expectations, the trough of delusionment, and hopefully you can get onto this slope of enlightenment and to the plane of productivity really, really quickly. So this is where I found myself as I dipped into the trough of disillusionment. And I think a lot of people have been there. Our passion became our day job, and our day job left us burnt out, seeking for more. And I realized that the cavalry isn't coming. And in conversations with the people who started the initiative, I Am The Cavalry, I realized that there was a lot that they were doing that really spoke to me. So you've probably all been in this situation. You're sitting around the dinner table with your friends or family, in pre-COVID times, and somebody asks, "Oh, what's the most secure operating system?" Now you've got to figure out an answer without telling people that, you don't like Windows, or, telling them that their MacBook isn't your favorite platform, that, you want them to go to Linux, but then you don't want to be their tech support for Linux. So, how do you answer this question? Different people answer it different ways. And then you probably get the question, which browser is most secure, as we all have. And you have the same kind of dilemma. Which mobile phone is most secure? And, the Windows mobile phone platform, you probably don't have to worry about too much anymore. But again, same types of questions. Well, increasingly, we have to ask which car is most secure. And I know some of the people who are car makers, and I can't tell the difference between one car and another. And when I ask them, sometimes they can't tell the difference. Which medical device is most secure? And again, sometimes it's hard to tell the difference, even if you know the people making the medical devices. Which home IoT product is most secure? And I'm sure you guys get this question all the time from your friends and family. Just finished up a Reddit Ask Me Anything where people were asking this question a lot. The answer is, do we know? Who knows? So now, not only did our passion become our day job, our day job has followed us home. If you're in the market for a new car, or if you go into the hospital, or if you're looking to get a new door lock, an always on internet connected door lock, or something similar for your home, how do you take your capabilities and skills that you use every day and use them when it's more at stake than just financial fraud, or just something that's changeable or a replaceable asset? What happens when it's your family's life and public safety that's on the line? So the I Am The Cavalry problem statement is that our dependence on connected technology is growing faster than our ability to secure it in areas that impact human life, public safety, and national security. And when we founded this initiative, before we founded the initiative, we always kind of thought, surely somebody's working on this. But what we learned is that the cavalry isn't coming, and that it falls to us. And that's in a lot of ways terrifying, because should the responsibility for ensuring human life and public safety fall to some, jerk with a red mohawk standing in front of a DEF CON sign? No, probably not. But it's also empowering, because it means it's our problem to solve. we have the task, and now we go do it. So when we formed I Am The Cavalry, and you can go look at our website to get more information, that was our problem statement. Our mission statement is to ensure connected technologies with the potential to impact public safety and human life are worthy of our trust. And we started with some unconventional means, and I'll go into those in a little bit of detail here. But I want to tell you a story about the first recall for medical devices because of security research. So a lot of people probably know who this is, Jay Radcliffe. He is both a diabetic patient and he's a security researcher himself. And early in the 20 teens, perhaps even before then, he found that his insulin pump had some pretty severe security flaws in it. Some security flaws that, being a security researcher, he knew could be used to do harm, to cause people to go into a diabetic coma, potentially from overdosing or underdosing on insulin. And so he wanted to raise the alarm about this. So he contacted the manufacturer. The manufacturer said, we know what we're doing. We're okay with this. We're okay with our processes. It's not going to be a big deal. So like most security researchers, he did the next best thing, which he thought, next thing in the process of getting these things fixed, which you heard Joe Min talk about it a little bit with Cult of the Dead Cow, is he went on stage at Black Hat and told the world about it so that patients, doctors, and others could defend themselves against potential adversaries and attacks. Now, that, as well as some other security research, caused the FDA to take notice. And one of the interesting things about the way the FDA took notice is that they, instead of saying security researchers are threatening patient safety, they said, we don't quite know what's going on, but we need to investigate. We need to figure out what's happening. So they invited hackers into a room and said, tell us your truths. We understand that you have truths that may be different from the truths that we see, may be different from the truths that medical device makers are telling us. We want to hear your truths from your perspective. And they listened. And we treated them with empathy. We said, okay, if you're willing to listen, we'll sit down and we want to meet you where you are and have these conversations with you in a tone of mutual understanding, mutual respect. And it was a really interesting approach. We're not the first ones to ever sit down and do that. But when we did this with the FDA, they really listened. And we've got a number of ways that we started approaching this. But the key was that we led with empathy. We really started those conversations in an empathetic way, listening rather than talking, explaining our perspectives, giving them some baseline information like what motivates security researchers, what are some of the differences between medical devices and regular computers. And that really helped turn them on. And so when they published their guidance, final guidance for pre-market submissions, which is the gating mechanism by which medical devices get onto the market, it was informed by information that security researchers had given them because of those conversations that we had. And many of you probably know this guy, Billy Rios. The device that he's looking at there is an infusion pump. It's like a digital IV. They're the most common devices in healthcare. And Billy was in the room with us when we had those conversations. So he knew how to get in touch with people at the FDA and at the medical device maker. When he found some issues with this device, he let him know. He said, I'm going to give you a year to fix this. You've got that amount of time to go and do whatever you need to do to get things changed. Unfortunately, another security researcher found the same issues, and they weren't as well connected. They didn't understand the different trade-offs. And so they just published all the information to their blog. And that catalyzed a couple of things. It catalyzed 2 separate security warnings, security letters from the FDA about these. Effectively, it was a medical device recall. It had the weight of of recalling those devices. So the medical device maker basically stopped selling some of the devices that were really old, and with the others, they issued updates to them. So because of Billy's work and because of the work of the other security researchers that came in and led with empathy, we were able to get the FDA to take a step that it had never taken before. When we started, we were told that people will have to die before you get any action out of any of these groups, but we've proved that that was not the case. We also published what we call a Hippocratic Oath for connected medical devices. And this is essentially following the same symbolic spirit of the original Hippocratic Oath, which is doctors take an oath to act in the best interest of their patients, but increasingly that patient care delivery is being done with medical devices. So they should also be built, developed, designed, implemented, maintained with that same spirit. And this has been a really, really powerful and influential document. And in fact, a lot of the information in that was taken up by the FDA and put into their post-market guidance. So this is when a device is already on the market. Medical device makers have to look for any potential safety and effectiveness issues and potentially do a recall or push a software update. And this document basically is a carrot and a stick that incentivizes medical device makers to want to have a coordinated vulnerability disclosure policy. So one of the things that we did is we turned the medical device market on its head and said, all right, everybody's got to have a coordinated vulnerability disclosure policy to accept reports from security researchers who find potential issues. This is from a series of experiments that we've done, a series of simulations that we've done working with doctors. There are some doctors who have given talks at DEF CON about security. With the FDA involved, with medical device makers involved, with healthcare providers involved, where we simulated what would happen if you have a hacked medical device. And what we found is that pretty much what all of us think would happen. But something special also happens, which is doctors are hackers too. They think around the specific problem and go and address the underlying root causes. And so they're able to bring these patients back to life in many cases, which is amazing. But the work that we've done has highlighted to a lot of these medical device makers and to a lot of these healthcare providers and to a lot of these doctors that there's something different in medical devices that they need to start paying attention to. And so some of them are starting to ask questions like, what happens if the medical device has some type of a flaw that adversaries take advantage of? And we're starting to change a lot more than just medical device maker regulation. We're starting to change general practices in hospitals and at medical device makers themselves. This is from, some of you probably recognize this. This is the Biohacking Village Device Lab, which we started in 2017, I believe, maybe 2016. And this was the first ever dedicated space that we had for medical device hacking at DEF CON. And you can see here in this picture, security researchers, the FDA, medical device makers, and people from hospitals all working together towards a common goal of making medical devices safer and more trustworthy. And today, we have, as you see on the right-hand side of your screen, this is the FDA commissioner tweeting out that he wants to see a lot more medical device makers going to DEF CON. And on the left side of your screen, you see some of the medical device makers who have actually come out to DEF CON, who brought devices into hackers' hands and said, find the flaws and let us know in good faith so that we can fix them before adversaries find out. It's an absolute sea change, and I believe it is saving lives every day. Now I want to come back to my congressional drinking buddies. So I want to talk a little bit about the way that public policymakers understand cybersecurity. And I'll say cyber. I can say that because I live inside DC. And if you're a purist, then yes, I'll drink later for saying cyber. So in 1984, the movie War Games came out, and it's one of my favorite movies. The story goes that Ronald Reagan saw the movie. He had a special screening to go see it, and he became obsessed with this idea that some kid in Colorado, or wherever he was located, Oregon, I think, could get on the internet, hack into NORAD, and potentially launch missiles against the Russians. And so he came into a top level meeting with the military one day. He said to one of the generals, he said, "Surely, General, tell me this can't happen." The general, being a good, dutiful general, said, "Sir, I don't know, but I'm going to go find out for you." He went away to the Pentagon and talked to whoever the top people were he had to talk to. Came back the next week. He said, "Mr. President, you can't believe how bad it actually is." And so out of this conversation, we got a law called the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, what's now known as the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. It's been through several iterations, but it's still the top law that law enforcement uses in the US to prosecute criminal acts or nation state acts of hacking, of breaking into a computer system, exceeding authorization, and doing something potentially harmful. The law hasn't changed a lot in the 30 plus years since, even though technology has changed a lot. And this is the type of things that policymakers are bombarded with. You see on the left, the Economist magazine, cyber war, and everything is about war. And the Talon manual, how to translate international law into cyberspace. And they have to understand it through analogy. And a lot of us understand certain things through analogy in these highly technical domains. I know I certainly do. But with policymakers, sometimes they only have one analogy, and sometimes the only analogy that they have is war. So they think of everything in computers as effectively some type of war. Well, in 2016, as many people here remember, I think it was October, the Mirai botnet broke out, took over IoT devices, webcams, DVRs, a bunch of other things, and caused a major outage of the internet in the US. Twitter was down, Amazon was down, all of the cat pictures on the internet were at risk. And public policymakers collectively lost their mind. They didn't know what to do. They didn't know how to treat this. A lot of them thought it was nation states. It must be Russia hacking us, going after us. Turns out it was a bunch of kids trying to DDoS a Minecraft server so they could make a little bit more money. And this is the kind of thing that, for the technical folks among us, we deal with this kind of thing every day. But they didn't know what to do. Fortunately, they turned to some of the people in our community to help. Some of the technical experts, some of the people who actually know how some of this stuff works. And we were able to start building bridges, building connections, leading with empathy, getting them a little bit smarter, a little bit better connected. And so when WannaCry happened the following year in 2017, they knew a little bit more. They knew a few more hackers that they could turn to, ask questions of. And so some of us did some congressional briefings or talked to the White House about what was happening. And that significantly evolved some of their thinking. NotPetya, very similar type of conversation. Now it's on everybody's radar, right? Public policymakers know they need to do something. What are they going to do? And you saw a flurry of laws come out. And then enter my friends, my drinking buddies, Representatives Langevin and Hurd. And I invited them out to DEF CON to experience what that event was like. Hey, come sit down with some hackers, see how we think, see how we drink, join us, become part of our party, and learn something, absorb something through osmosis. And to their credit, they took us up on it. They came out, they were good sports, they drank at their first ever talk, and they had a great time. And it was, I think, one of the most influential things that we could have done at that point in time to help nudge forward this policymaking capability. And in fact, Representative Langevin, a couple of years later, given passion to plea, on the floor of the House, talking about what he learned at DEF CON, the motivations of security researchers, talking about what he had experienced, how much he had taken away from those conversations, and advocated strongly in favor of protecting security researchers, acting in good faith, and having more vulnerability disclosure policies out there around the federal government and elsewhere. So we saw a flurry of laws, a flurry of other things that were more technically literate, more aligned with what hackers believe in, care about. In one piece of legislation, for instance, and this one's been re-released as of earlier this week, actually, the Cyber Shield Act calls for an advisory committee. And when the congressional staffer was putting this together, because of some of the relationships I developed with him, he came and said, "Hey, is there anything I should do to make this bill better?" And I said, you talk about having an advisory committee, but in here I see companies and government and academics. What about independent security researchers? He's like, "Oh, I thought they would be covered in companies." I was like, "Nope, there's a difference." So in about a half an hour, we sat down and had this conversation. And this is one of the things that came out of it, is now we have in proposed law that independent cybersecurity researchers need to be a part of the conversation. In January 2020, we brought about 50 hackers to the Capitol, sat them down with 13 congressional offices, and just did a briefing. All of the hackers briefed out what they were concerned about with these congressional staffers, and they listened and they took it away and they developed relationships. And so there's still some of these conversations that are ongoing between the hackers and the members of Congress or the congressional staffers at that level. In fact, in 2020, the Internet of Things Cybersecurity Improvement Act was passed into law. And you see one of my drinking buddies is on this list of members of Congress who sponsored this. And it's part of the conversations that we had out there were around this. Some of the conversations that we had with some of the other staffers and members on this list also paid fruit, paid dividends. And now there's actually laws out there to help protect the US government from vulnerable IoT devices and to allow them to raise the bar defensively. And included in this, by the way, is a provision that those devices have to have a coordinated vulnerability disclosure program associated with them. Now, this is a story from just last week. And Joe Min wrote part of this story, or was in the byline for this story. From the White House, I read on the internet that there's going to be an executive order coming from the White House. And some of the ideas in that came directly from security researchers. They're good ideas that we've had in the community for a while, and they're finally being listened to. So the message I want to leave you with is that the cavalry isn't coming. So it falls to you to be the cavalry, to change the world, to make it something much better, because you're not just a security researcher. You can be so much more. We can be the cavalry. And I'll leave you with one last quote. Margaret Mead is a cultural anthropologist, and she had a really great line that we loved in forming the cavalry and in everything that we've done. And that is, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. So with that, I thank you. If there are any questions, I can answer them live. Otherwise, I'll drop into the Discord chat and we can continue the conversation there.
Thank you, Beau. I really appreciate your time and the call to action here, an amazing presentation. And we're following up with all the conversation in Discord. If you just join us, the link is in the bottom of the screen. And we're going to take a quick break right now to get set for the next speaker. All the speakers are actually hanging out in Discord. Thank you again, Beau. I really appreciate you supporting the event and the community as always. So we'll go in a break right now.
Thank you all.